Hello, and welcome to our virtual seminar, The Paperless Law Firm, A Digital Dream, brought to you by the Practice Management Resource Center at the State Bar of Michigan. I'm Joanne Hathaway, both your host and one of two speakers today. All attendees are in listen-only mode without video activation. We do encourage your questions as always, so please type those in the Q&A pod, and Dan and I will get to those either during the session or at the end. Just a brief introduction about me. I am the Practice Management Advisor through the Practice Management Resource Center at the State Bar of Michigan, and as such, I provide practice management, risk management, and technology training and resources to the State Bar of Michigan membership and staff. I also conduct personalized on-site law firm consultations, both voluntary and for the Attorney Grievance Commission and the Attorney Discipline Board. Joining me as co-presenter today is Attorney Dan Sigel, who is the president of Integrated Technology Services, which assists law firms and businesses by helping them implement technology and improving their workflows. He's also the principal of the law offices of Daniels, his insights as an attorney to assist his technology clients. So on to today's agenda, which will include helping you identify what your paperless goals are, also how you and your firm can benefit from having a paperless practice, and we're going to cover some perils involved with your planning. We will overview the needed hardware and software, naming conventions, and more. So now over to Dan for his introduction and paperless goals and benefits.
Thank you, Joanne, and welcome to everyone. We're here to talk about the paperless office, a topic near and dear to me because my office has been paperless since I opened it over 16 years ago, and in my prior firm, we were virtually paperless. And when people ask me why I am paperless, the main reason is I get a lot more done a lot more efficiently. And that's the goal. What you have to figure out is, do you want to be completely paperless? We do everything on our computers. We will print out paper and as needed, but for the most part, we have large monitors. We are able to view all of our documents and do everything seamlessly. It is me, my paralegal, and another associate attorney, and we do everything that way. And we use less paper. We have far fewer costs than most people would even imagine, because as a practical matter, we don't have to worry about storage costs. We don't have to worry about those types of things. So we don't have those issues. And so that's a big part of our work. We can do things. We have multiple, versions of documents. So today, for example, one of the areas we do in my office is appellate practice, and we won a major appeal today, so we're quite happy. Well, one of the benefits of that is the documents, the drafts, which were extensive. They're not on paper. They are on electronic, and we go through them. When I went to argue the case in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, though, I had my paper notes. I didn't have any computers or technology. Why? Because I didn't need to. The benefits of being paperless or less paper, however you want to call it, really made it simple. But it's our everyday practice where everything we do is easier because we have it on our screen. We don't have to go up and find files. We don't have the storage costs for closed files. Everything is right there. And as a result, we can find exactly what we need when we need it. And as I said, one of the issues is, cost. It's a factor in every office. Well, we don't really have a budget for paper. Every year, right around now, I wait for one of the suppliers to have a sale on cases of paper, and then I buy the paper for the office. And typically I'll buy about 3 cases of paper, and that's it. I don't have to deal with the storage companies. I don't have to deal with all of those things. We don't need fancy red welds. Whatever original papers that we do maintain, like a fee agreement or something, those we do keep in a manila folder. But when everything is scanned, so that when the case is done, we don't need to maintain those documents. There was a question about, what about maintaining original wills? We don't do that in our office. And in fact, the ethical guidance in Pennsylvania, where I am, is that you can do it, but we don't recommend it because you have to maintain those documents indefinitely. And if it means if you close your practice, you've got to find people. So we always provide those documents to clients, knowing that we do have an electronic backup. So we use the paperless technology all the time. And I love this picture because when people come to work for us, could be a law clerk or someone new, one of the questions they eventually ask is, well, where are the files stored? And they didn't realize it, but they walked past the one double drawer cabinet that we have across from my paralegal's desk. And that's where we store everything. The only thing that we don't keep in there are the bound copies of appeal briefs that we need in case I have to go in and argue the appeal. But as soon as those are done, those are disposed of as well, either shredding if there's confidential information, or we recycle them. But we don't have storage cabinets. We don't need the little the clips, like the binder clips that we used to use in my old firms. We don't need the expensive file holders and all of that stuff. None of that. It's all on our computer. And as a practical matter, that means we can access it anywhere. And it has become my belief, especially since the pandemic, that if you don't digitize all your files, you may not be ethically compliant, because how can you practice if you're not allowed to be in your office, as I wasn't for quite some time, and you can't access the information? The other is, as a practical matter, storage is cheap. So we talk about, a CD or how much it holds compared with, a file drawer cabinet or something. Well, it's even easier than that, because, the old days when you would store on CDs and everything else are long gone. Even we mostly now do it in the cloud and on site. So my system, we have an on-site server. And what do? We have a backup on site, and we also back up to the cloud. And when you back up to the cloud, which simply means something there that's not in your office, our monthly storage bill for cloud storage is about $250 to $300 total for all of our files. That's all of the files, not just our server, but our billing server, which is separate, as well as the individual computers that the staff and I use, all stored for under $300. In addition, we store on site on a backup, so we don't have to worry about clumsy hard drives. We have one large external drive. It's called an IOSafe, IOSAFE. And why do we like IOSafe? Because it's a specialty backup drive, or external drive, that will withstand fire, rain, etc. And if you saw my office, you'd see I'm in an old building. I rent an old house. Well, the building could easily burn down tomorrow. And if it did, while I wouldn't be happy, all I'd need to do is get a new server, get new equipment, load my files onto the server, and we can be up and running in no time. We also don't have the low-level costs that a lot of firms do. We don't have file clerks. We don't have anyone who is sort of pushing paper. My paralegal is very advanced in terms of what she does. She's usually the final prep for briefs and those types of things, but she doesn't need to do these matters because we don't have to have files. in terms of looking for documents. We know where they are online, and I'll talk about this later, that not only do we know where they are online, but as a practical matter, we know, how to find them, they're named properly, etc. And that's the type of information you need to be able to get quickly so that you don't have to waste the time of getting up, finding a file, going back, bringing it to your desk, all the while you're hoping that your client is still on the phone. And it makes life easier. And as a practical matter, our case management system allows us to store every email in or out of the office. So they're all saved. And if you don't use case or matter management, then you can use Adobe Acrobat software. So as a practical matter, you don't need to ever print out or store in folders every client matter within Outlook, which can often create slowness or other issues. We're efficient in everything we do in terms of that. Similarly, when we're doing this, as I said before, we can work anywhere. When the pandemic hit and the governor of Pennsylvania announced that we had to close and leave our office, we all went, okay, that's fine, because all we had to do was go home and log into the office remotely, which is exactly what we did. And we had no issues other than I had to set up a little spot actually in my kitchen where I could work and deal with the office information. But it wasn't a problem because everything we had was electronic and available. And that's why, as I said before, I take the view that if you're not all electronic, you really aren't meeting your duty of competence to clients under Rule 1.1, which requires you to have technological competence, not just in your practice areas, but in the management of your office. And what's more important than being able to access client files? Nothing that I can think of. Plus, when you're paperless, we have clients who will call and ask about their wills or something else or their file. Well, they could have come here 15 years ago. It wouldn't matter. I just, because of the electronic office, the paperless office, I can find any document in a couple of seconds and say, here it is. And if they needed a copy of a living will or something, we can instantly email it to them. No hassle, no problem whatsoever. In addition, we can seamlessly work and collaborate. What I mean by that is, I mentioned earlier how we store all of our documents. Well, when we annotate the documents and route them back and forth, there is a note typed, not in someone's gibberish handwriting, that is there so I can see what my office has, done and what their comments are. You need to change this. We think this, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's better. We also don't have the hassle of where is that item, because whatever you're looking for, and I started practicing when there were no computers. I didn't own a computer until 2.5 years after I graduated law school, because it wasn't until 2 years after law school that the Commodore 64 came out. We were using Selectric typewriters. We were using copy paper that was, the carbon paper. We were using onion skin for copies. We've come a long way since then. And the stress of finding files, and then you can't find something, the client's on hold, the client's getting annoyed, you're getting annoyed, the person who supposedly filed it doesn't remember filing it. That's all gone. And that means we save a lot of time, because you call me about your matter, I can call it up and have an answer in seconds. Today, a client called a law firm we work with, and they had questions. Well, I hadn't really talked to them in a few years, but in one mouse click, I was in their file, and then I could see the information and answer their question. I didn't say, well, your file is closed. We're going to have to call the retrieval service, get it back. And of course, there's a fee for everything they do. No, I had the information right where I needed it. Another is that the documents that you need are always there. Once you save a document, you do not have that problem anymore because it's there, it's electronic, it's backed up, etc. And it does matter because I received a notice in one particular case where a lawyer said, well, you didn't do something for a particular client in a business matter. Well, we had everything electronic. I pulled up the file and the engagement letter, which explained that, hi, we're not here to provide certain type of advice. And if you need information about that, we're happy to help you find someone, but it's not what we do. And it's not what is part of this engagement. Finding that letter and sending it to the carrier gave them the assurance that there was no claim and they handled it accordingly. But if you don't have those records, forget it. And that's why it's also important that in a paperless office, you maintain your email, because email is communication. And if you don't find the email, that's going to be the spot, of course, where you say you said something, and on the other hand, they say you didn't. Similarly, as I mentioned before, things happen. You might not get, Hurricane Sandy or something like that, but things happen, such as fires. This is an old building with 100 amp service where I'm speaking from. That could burn down. I don't want it to, and I hope it doesn't, but if it did, we wouldn't be at a loss for all of our information. When I was a young attorney, before there were really computers in those couple of years, a major office building in Philadelphia burned down, and those lawyers had to recreate their files from paper, from court records. It was a nightmare. But most of this equates to one concept: better service for our clients. And what I mean by that is when you can find information and give it to them and respond quickly, it makes a big difference. And I'll give you an example of how our paperless office makes clients happier and saves them money, but keeps them coming back. When we draft wills and other documents for our clients, we charge them a fee, and they never have to pay us again for any of those services. So if they want to change the will, they need to change something on a power of attorney, it's all electronic. We open up, we make those changes, and we don't charge. So they know they can call me, not have a bill, and that when they do that, of course, we always talk about what else we do. They're on our holiday card list and calendar lists and all those things, but they know that there's no cost to call the lawyer back, so they want to call us back. And as a practical matter, almost all of the changes that we're ever asked to do are related to change the name on a beneficiary or on someone who's your agent and all of that. And that's why we like to do that. It brings the clients back. And we can tell you that when they review us online or comment about where to go for these types of things, they say, yeah, we love that we don't have to pay. Here you can see was a note we did on, we were tracking how many reams of paper we used in a month. And these were before and after we were doing more and more electronic work. And you could see just how few reams of paper we use in our office. Not because we are not allowed to, or I don't let people, it's because we don't need them. We also, and this is a little bit of an older slide, but it shows how much space our case management database was taking up. And when I say the database, I mean the database, every email, every document, every attachment to an email, anything related to our office was stored in these folders, and it was 106 gig. Currently, it's about 150 gig of data. that costs nothing to store, and you can put that, or in your pocket in a flash drive. So you can't do that with your paper. You can't do that with anything. And what you don't want to have happen is this. This is the actual home office of someone, all I'll say is, who is close to me familiarly, and he works from home for a major computer company. How you can find anything in this office is beyond me. I wouldn't walk in. It would make my allergies go nuts. And now I'm going to turn it back to Joanne.
Thank you, Dan. We do have a few questions in the pod. Would you like to address those at this time?
Yes,
Oh,
I'll do them. They're pretty quick. The first is, why do we have hard copies of appellate briefs? Reason is that when I have to argue the case, I have hard copies. I do not work. Very traditional that way. I don't want to bring an iPad or anything into court. I find it's distracting to me. And so I still bring in paper with my notes. I have them that way. And so that's why, but we don't need them. We do electronically file all of our briefs. I've heard of Cloud HQ. There are lots of services that synchronize and store. We do it with a backup piece of software that does it for us, but there's a ton of those, and we'll talk about some of the software. Great question is, what clauses do we put into our agreements? We put into every fee agreement and engagement letter notification that we are electronic and we are paperless, and that we will provide to the clients copies of any papers we get. But if they want paper file, they have to pay for it. We're happy to provide them an electronic file at no cost. We also have clauses relating to email communication, cell phone communication, and other electronic items like that. We also tell them we back up in the cloud. And I'm asked, the last question is, do I have a cyber endorsement on my professional liability policy? Actually, no, we carry separate cyber insurance, not an endorsement. We use it through a cyber insurance company. In my experience, and that's a whole other program, you get much better coverage when you buy a full cyber insurance policy, which is what I recommend to my clients. All yours.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Okay, so I'm going to focus a little bit more with this portion of the presentation on the procedural component before we get into hardware and software and naming and some other hopefully helpful information areas to help you go paperless. So Dan was just talking about insurance, and I always tend to think of things from a risk management perspective because I actually worked in the world of legal malpractice insurance in claims and risk management for about 14 years. So that's how my brain thinks. So what I'd like to do is talk to you about what I have identified as the top 10 perils in working with law firms as they're undergoing their paperless journey. And so this will not only provide guidance on what you need to do, but what will happen if you don't do it right. So I'm going to start with, of course, peril number 1, lost time, money, clients, paper, and sanity due to lack of a written paperless policy. So a verbal plan is better than none, but not that much. With a verbal plan, interpretation is totally subjective. And what I found is that people relying upon their memory is not the best thing. And when they can't remember, then they rely upon the memories of others, which can be even more dangerous. So what they are typically doing is making things up as they go along, something you don't want to do with your paperless law firm. Also think that there is also little ability to back reference with a verbal plan. And what I mean by that is your plan is or should be continually evolving. So as you're starting this and you're working forward, you really need to be able to rely upon your historical documentation, so your policies and procedures, to evaluate what you've done in the past, what has worked, what doesn't, what isn't, and also having such a plan in writing helps you build your policy manual. Another thing I'm a stickler for, which is extremely helpful for training. So what if you onboard new people or people suddenly leave? You'll have a working training guide in place. Also, with a verbal plan, there's little ability to have a check and balance system to clearly identify how things are working. And this is something you should be doing continuously. You should often be checking to ensure your plan is being followed. And it's a much more easily done when it's in writing. So what should be included? What categories should you have in your written paperless plan? First, you should have is what I call the commander-in-chief, and people kind of laugh at this, but it's kind of like the captain of the ship in the hospital. This is the person that people seek out when they need clarification, when they have a problem, when they want to hopefully express their gratification for going paperless in the practice. And I've seen it so many times, and people don't know what to do and have total misconceptions about who's calling the shots. They simply go to a coworker, ask what to do next, and rely upon whatever information might be given. So everybody's starting to suddenly go in a different direction. Again, this can be a recipe for disaster and certainly a potential malpractice issue. So hopefully the information they're given is correct, but if it's not, again, it can be a disaster. So it's really important for this commander-in-chief to have all of the information on which to base further decisions. So if all information isn't shared regarding problems or issues in the plan, this person will be making decisions based upon incomplete and inadequate information. Next in the plan should be identification of the individuals involved and what are their responsibilities. So think, for instance, and of course this is going to be different depending on how many people you have in your firm, but by way of example, receptionist A is responsible for opening and date stamping the mail. Receptionist B is responsible for passing out the mail to its respective owners. Support staff C is responsible for diarying the dates and scanning the documents, and so on it goes. And the plan also needs to include information on the document types to be included in the plan. So are you going to be digitizing your emails? Hopefully so. And there are ways that you can do that very efficiently with applications such as Adobe Acrobat Pro, DC. Again, we'll be talking about that a little bit later. What you can link to from another source via a portal. What about legacy documents, other documents that pre-existed going paperless that you may wish to include in the plan? And that's a big thing, because when people start, you know, you want to know what has been digitized, and if you're working on a matter, if you started to go paperless in the midst of before you've opened a new file in the midst of a matter, does everyone know what's in there and what's the timeline for that? So that definitely is an important component of when you. Okay, you also need a detailed process to turn documents to digital. And remember, this should be for each document type, because they're coming in different modes into your practice. So who's going to be doing what, and what is the process? Opening the mail, date stamping it, scanning and shredding, turning it over to the responsible attorneys. Again, I touched upon that just a little bit. So not only should you have this detailed process, but you should have a daily document to digital timeline. So for instance, say if the mail typically comes in at a certain time between 10 and 2, And I don't know about you, but here it seems like where I am, it's like Pony Express anymore, so you can never really tell. But anyway, that being said, and you know that hopefully the process will begin when the mail arrives, and you can invent a timeline. And this is important because if someone is looking in a digital file and they expect everything to be there from the day prior, and if it's not, again, a recipe for disaster. So here they are, they could be relying upon incomplete data. So again, potential malpractice issue, ethics issue, and at the very least, embarrassment. So, and you also need to have a contingent plan for this because things don't always work as they should. We all know that. The mail might be late, someone might be out sick. So you do need to have an alternative plan in place. And you do need to have strict naming conventions. Again, we'll go into detail in that as we move forward. Peril number 2, implementation failure due to inadequate hardware. And I'm going to throw, I've got the graphic there of the hardware, but obviously software as well. So as you begin your paperless journey and you're building your written paperless plan, you need to ensure that you have adequate hardware and software in place. And the best laid plans will be doomed to fail with this process, even if you have everything written out. If you cannot accommodate and if you don't have reliable, up-to-date and needed hardware and software. So we'll be going over our recommendations for that again as we move along. So still into the category of peril number 2, and by the way of clarification, how much data do you need to store? That's a biggie. What will you do with closed files? Are you going to keep those? Where are you going to archive them? What about scanning needs? Digitize. So these are just some thoughts to get you percolating on some areas that you need to consider as you're moving through this process. Okay, peril number 3, putting the cart before the horse, thinking it's a work in progress, which results in total chaos and a recipe for malpractice. I see this a lot when I go into law firms, and I had mentioned earlier that at times I do go in for the attorney discipline board when people have a practice management issue. And I see people making up things as they go along, and that can be very dangerous, and to include when you are planning on going paperless. So you wouldn't build a house without having a blueprint. That's what I tell everyone, and you shouldn't move forward with your plan until you have it fully in place. So don't make it up as you go along. Peril number 4, haphazard document naming conventions resulting in a black abyss. We've all been there, right? And we may have even done it ourselves, myself included. We haven't developed a naming convention. We save documents, even if we don't shred the hard copy. But if you do, and then you try and find what you've saved, it can take unbelievable amounts of time to hunt and peck to find documents, not knowing how they are named, and especially if people are working in shared files. And if they're trying to find, or if you're trying to find documents named by others, well, enough said, but it's awful. We've all experienced it. So this is one of the most important components of your paperless practice, and everyone in the firm needs to practice strict compliance with this. No exceptions. Moving along to peril number 5, poor or absent search mechanisms resulting in the inability to find and retrieve documents. So again, this goes right along with being able to find your documents and the naming conventions. But so even if you do have good naming conventions, you're still going to have the need in many situations to search for certain types of files with some key terms. So in a nutshell, you need to have good search functionality and training in place. Peril number 6, failing to define processes resulting in gap stop measures by whoever is working in the system. So we talked about this under peril number 1, where you need your written plan, but even with a written plan, as you move forward, you're going to find out that people have questions or are not quite sure how to get from one step to the next, so they ask their coworker again or simply make it up. So everything needs to be clearly defined with, and hopefully you have checklists as well. Peril number 7, mobile lawyering has its benefits, but with it comes the risks associated with unsecured and lost hardware. And just to add to this, some of the text that I have on the screen here too, this is nothing new, but how much this has evolved with COVID. And so now we're not just talking about mobile lawyering, but now we're moving into, we're seeing a lot of hybrid situations where right after COVID, suddenly everybody was working from home. But now I'm seeing a lot of hybrid situations where people are sometimes going into their physical office, sometimes working from home, sometimes mobile lawyering. So we have, and then they have some folks at the firm who are working from home all the time. So it's just for not a very eloquent way to say it, a mishmash of people everywhere, which makes paperless even more important, but more with all of these different scenarios. And so you really need to have a strict protocol in place. And we know that everybody's heard about cybersecurity issues and how those ransomware, I mean, they're just growing, and you hear about new instances every day. So peril number 7, you need to have strict protocols in place, and people need to be accountable. Encryption needs to be enabled. You need to make sure inventory is accounted for, and the list kind of goes on and on. That could be a whole other webinar. Peril number 8, lost data due to failure to preserve and protect. So you must have backup systems in place, as well as protocol to safeguard the data while it's in transit and also at rest. We're closing in on the end of our perils here. Peril number 9, process breakdowns due to failure to test, define, and refine. Are you conducting test restores on your backups? Are you monitoring your hardware and software systems to ensure they're stable? All of your updates are occurring, and that they are providing the service intended for. Peril number 10. So in alignment with peril number 9, are you monitoring everything having to do with your paperless process? The commander-in-chief needs to be spot checking to ensure naming conventions are being followed. And there are ways that you can lock them down, and we'll talk about that. But you need to not just get the system in place and then think it's working, because it needs to be continually monitored. One should never assume. Also, are all of those individuals involved following the timelines in the guidelines specified in the policy? So my suggestion is to schedule quarterly meetings, or really at the beginning, they should be much more frequent than that, but at least schedule those to discuss your paperless systems and needed enhancements. So you may meet and have nothing to talk about whatsoever, but these should be scheduled automatically so you can participate in frank discussions about the system. Also, I'd like to point out, because I do, when I go into the firms, I talk a lot to the lawyers, but I also talk separately many times with support staff. And I would just encourage everyone to ensure that all people involved in this process feel that they can talk candidly and not be fearful of their input if they do have some constructive criticism. Usually those people who are working with us, and most likely almost everyone in the firm would be if you're going paperless, they know what's going on, and they're on the front lines, and just make sure that there is an atmosphere of inclusion for your mutual end goal of going paperless. So also, everyone should know of any policy or process changes. Many times people feel left out when they haven't been informed. And if there's not a chain involved to ensure everyone is up to date, this can cause process breakdowns and even worse, disgruntled employees. So that concludes the top 10 paperless perils. And now back over to Dan to discuss hardware.
Thank you, Joanne. I don't know. I think there may be a couple questions for you as we get into hardware, so you can look at those and then go back. But there are basic hardware components that are essential in every paperless office. And, you know, I like to consider that my office and my home are both my offices because we keep all of our records at home electronic, and we find that these systems work everywhere, whether or not your family's real techie or not. First is a scanner. You need a dedicated scanner to address and to scan all of the information. When you ask people, you're going to find out that everyone pretty much recommends the same thing, the Fujitsu Scan Snap. Why? Because it's reasonably priced. They don't really break. And they can do single, double-sided, color, black and white, different size paper all at once. And they're just sort of the de facto scanners that are used pretty much in every, particularly solo, small, mid-sized offices. I've installed them in firms everywhere. They're easy to set up. They just work. The second thing you need, and what I also want to point out, is it's a dedicated scanner. Multifunction devices tend to be clunky and tend to sort of slow you down. You don't want that. You want a dedicated scanner. Its only purpose is to scan. In our desks, every one in my office has a scanner and they have a laser printer. And we don't really have a copier because if we scan it, the laser printer is the copier and the printer for the copier, which is the scanner. And we have one color printer in the office if we need to print in color. The other thing that's essential, because you're going to be looking at documents on your screen, is to either have multiple monitors, as is here, which I can't stand, or dual or a large monitor. My office, our preference is large monitors. Everyone has at least a 27-inch monitor on their desk. I have a 32. It's like watching TV. No matter what document I have, it's easy to see. There's a very good article in this month's PC Magazine for those, and you can get it online. It's fully electronic now, about the benefits of multiple monitors, which some people love, or one large monitor and why people use one or the other. Obviously, everyone needs to have a computer. There needs to be a central server or computer where all of the documents are stored. You need a shredder, because you need to be able to dispose of the documents that contain any type of confidential or sensitive information, or depending on how your state defines the rules, whether it is simply any information relating to the representation. In our office, we have 3 trash cans for each office: a recycling can, a trash can, and a shredding can. They're different colors, and we know what items go in which. You need a printer, obviously. You may or may not need a fax machine. Why? Because we don't fax from a fax machine. We use an electronic fax service. I've used that for years, and it really works efficiently. Plus, all of our incoming faxes come in as PDFs. So we're all set to go to store it just directly from an email. As I said, you may or may not need a copier, depending on how your office functions and whether there are needs that would really implicate using a copier. Trying to get to next, here we are. Each office's needs are unique. You're going to need each of these items because they're essential to every office, but you probably need to call in someone or make certain that someone is giving you guidance, because just because it works for your friend or it works for me doesn't mean that brand X of hardware or brand X of software or case management software is right for you. You need to know what your office needs are. You need to listen to people who've done these implementations, and you want to find the combination that is right for you. If you don't, you're going to discover that, like anything else, just because your friend said it, it doesn't make it so. I mentioned the ScanSnap software printer. They've now come out with some newer versions than even what's here. But this scanner is sort of the heart of the paperless office. And we do have them at every desk. We also have a process where any mail or anything that comes in must be scanned by one person, or depending on the size of your office, multiple people who are of specific responsibility. Because the biggest gap in paperless offices is if you don't have a process where one person or a group of people are responsible for digitizing the documents. Because I can assure you that if you don't have this procedure, whatever document it is that you need is going to be the one where you suddenly do not have it electronically. That's always the case. And as an anecdote, when we started on a paperless office, I was working on a project for a client, and I had handwritten some notes about how things would go. Guess what document I didn't scan? And of course, what did I have to work on that first week was that project. Fortunately, my office is a mile from my house and I was able to get in. But if I was talking about an area where you weren't allowed in or something, or this were, following a fire or something, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Why? Because I forgot to scan the key document. Here are some of the ways you can use a Fujitsu ScanSnap to do a lot of things. And I just mentioned PC World, but PC Magazine, but I will tell you that when you're looking at the hardware to buy, whether it's your computer, your monitor, or something else, the places that I go first are PC World, PC Magazine, both of which have great websites with reviews and everything else that you can trust, or another site called ZDNet. Why? Because their editors and their reporters know what are the best products, and you can trust them. They're not sort of bought and sold by the manufacturers, and you'll see. So over the years, as the quality of printers and cost of printing has changed, their recommendations have changed too, not based on one company versus another. These are the things you need to know about. And of course, lastly, what I mentioned before is a shredder. You need to shred all confidential, sensitive, or other information relating to a client's representation. We shred all of that. The only documents we won't are things that are in the public domain, which could be a brief, but it's those types of documents. Everything is shredded. When in doubt, our answer is we shred. You can also use different software, which I'll let Joanne talk to you about.
Dan, can you advance my slide for me? My computer wants to be temperamental. Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, I do seem to have my control back now. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, productivity software. It goes without saying that whether you're paperless or not, law firms need good productivity software. And nothing new. The overwhelming favorite for quite some time now is Office 365 for a lot of reasons. One of the advantages of this cloud-based option is that updates are in real time, so that alleviates Hello, everyone. It seems like we did lose our connection. I hope you can hear me now, and we will resume. Just a moment, please. Thank you for your patience. Okay, let me just make sure. Dan, are you with me?
I am here.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. I lost screen sharing for just a moment, so I wanted to make sure that we were back up and going. So, okay, so we just talked about productivity software, and next, having the ability to convert documents into portable document format known as PDFing, which we're all familiar with, is critical to the success of any paperless practice. And while it's neither here nor there, many people don't know, but just as a tidbit, that PDF was actually created by Adobe. And it is the gold standard for converting documents from their original format. So think Microsoft Word to a digital format that can be shared, searched, and stored across many platforms. And this type of software is also extremely important for security of documents by way of encryption, removal of metadata, and much more. So, and also PDFs take up very little space on your hard drive, and the format allows for using electronic signatures to determine the authenticity of the document. Our personal favorite is Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, and Dan actually and his assistant actually wrote the Bible on this through the ABA. I do invite you to check out that publication, and maybe Dan can share a little bit more about that when we conclude our presentation today. We do have a discount available for that for you as well through the State Bar of Michigan. But that being said, although it's one of our favorites, it's certainly not the only option that's available. So a few other options that really have great functionality include Nuance Power PDF and Foxit. So you might want to take a look at those as well. Document management software is a software application used to track and store electronic documents, and there are numerous applications available. They incorporate naming conventions, and we were talking about that earlier, how the importance of that so they incorporate it, and you do have the option to what we call have a lockdown system. And so this is something, again, that's imperative in the naming system. So people can be forced into saving documents in certain pathways and with certain naming conventions. They also have a myriad of other functions. Think of some of these as, well, you can see it in the hub right here, multiple security levels, PDF conversion, optical character recognition capabilities, document workflows, version control, and the list goes on and on. Employing a document management software application in a firm can circumvent users from kind of going rogue and developing their own naming protocols. And coupling document management software with the paperless plan, it's not a necessity, but it can be a real lifesaver to ensure that there is naming uniformity, and it allows for prompt and accurate document retrieval. Practice management software, sometimes called case management software, people use it interchangeably. If I had one software recommendation for lawyers, it would be to use practice management software, whether you're paperless or not. So there are several choices available for you. When I started the bar several years ago, There was no such thing as cloud practice management. We had like 3 options and they were all proprietary, and it's just a buyer's market, and it's wonderful. So there are very, very many choices for you to avail yourselves to. If you're not familiar with this, kind of on a global basis, it incorporates everything you're seeing here on the screen into one application. It's what we call a matter-centric application, linking to the matters you enter into it. You can link to all of your documents for the most part, contacts, emails, calendar events, phone call records, time and billing, calendaring, and generally more. I liken it to a red rope in a computer, and the only bad thing I have to say about it is that it causes middle age spread because you never need to get up from your desk. Billing and accounting software is just that, pretty much self-explanatory. It's software that captures time, produces bills, and has accounting functionality. Many time and billing applications might require synchronization with an accounting platform if they're just time and billing for accounting functionality. Many practice management software applications do have some billing and accounting baked into their platforms, and or they synchronize with standalone billing and accounting platforms. And while billing and accounting can be accomplished manually and saved digitally in the paperless practice, really having dedicated software is exponentially better. Dan talked about backing up. So it is imperative that you have good backup for your systems. And he talked about the IO Safe, which has been around for a long time. It is tried and true, and it is it's really a wonderful backup system. So, but that is the one solution is what he described as an agent-based solution, and this means that you install a software agent on your computer to be backed up when data is transferred over the network to the appliance by using the agent. And typically the backup appliance solution is used to back up local servers. He mentioned that. And in addition, you should consider sending an encrypted version of the backup data to the cloud. And you should look to a provider that allows you to control the encryption key used to encrypt the data. A best practice would be to have multiple versions of the backup data in the cloud. That way, if one gets corrupted, you'll have alternate backup sets to restore from. So over to you, Dan.
Thank you. One of the things that is essential in a paperless system is how you name your documents, because how you name them is how you find them. And in our office, we have naming protocols for everything. And when I say everything, I mean, you name it, we have protocols for it. And yes, we're small, but everyone has to comply. And why do we need to do that? Because one, you need to be able to find documents, and finding documents means by their name. And when we work in front of hearing officers for some of our cases. Well, are they saved as HO decision or hearing officer? And when you search, if you start writing hearing and it's HO, you have to discover real quickly that this is not a good idea. You need to have consistent naming protocols for everything. I'm trying to move the slide so we can finish up here. And it doesn't want to go. If you can, Joanne, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, just a moment.
Meanwhile, I'll talk about it, though, that when you're talking about naming conventions, every firm has unique needs. And that means that you have to have naming conventions that apply to you and your office, because what you need in your office is going to be different from someone else's. There may be, some areas where there's overlap and everything else, but you need to be able to name things. Essential to doing that is how you name it. We always put a date in our file names, and it is always by year, date, and month. Year, 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit date. Why? Because that will sort, no matter what system you use, in date order. So that becomes essential. And then you need to be able to find your documents, which means you need a search function, whether it's your Windows search, which has gotten better, or we have case management software, which we can find any document based on name or content. Typically, I say within about 2 to 3 seconds at most. And that means searching through every document ever created in our office for the last 16 years that's in our system. Joanne?
Okay, so we are coming to the end of our programming here, but we always like to conclude our paperless present how much time and how much money you can save over the course of a year if you do implement an effective paperless program. So how long does it take you to get up from your desk to retrieve a file? Now we have an example of 2 minutes here. Of course, that may vary depending on the size of your firm and how many different places a file may be stored. But for purposes of this example, we're going to say 2 minutes. So how long does it take when you find that file to find what you need in that file? Well, we have 1 minute. I think that is conservative, again, depending on the size of the matter, but we're going to say a minute. So just getting up and finding a file takes 3 minutes. And how many times a day do you do this? Say if you do it 10 times or possibly even more. That's 30 minutes per day. That's 150 minutes per week. That's 7,500 minutes per year. And that's 125 hours per year. And conservatively, that's more than equates to 2 days per year finding files. So conservatively at $150 per hour, and many people are charging much more for that, but conservatively at $150 per hour, that's $18,750 in billable time. And think if you have multiple timekeepers in your firm, so you could multiply this many times over, and as far as how much you're losing if you're having to get up and search for paper and search for files. So how long does it take you to find a file stored on your computer? Well, we say about 30 seconds. So hopefully that has provided you with some information to help you realize how much time and money you could save having your paperless program. We hope you have enjoyed our program today, and we do have some questions in the queue here. Dan, I'm going to open that up, and okay. Dan, I'm going to tee this one right up for you because I think this is the one you could best answer. For mobile computing, what software service do you recommend for remote wiping of the device if it is lost or stolen? It is simple with phones and Chromebooks, but what about Windows laptops? Do you have an answer for that?
Well, if it's lost or stolen, the first thing you should do is it should be encrypted so that it can only be accessed by password and that no one can see your data otherwise. That's the first step because it's harder to remotely wipe products, but if they're encrypted with proper and secure passwords and proper storage, that's what we do first. And then it's going to depend. You know, I don't have a specific product recommendation for that other than that.
Okay, Dan, and you had also mentioned PC Mag and what else did you mention? PC Mag,
World,
PC World, okay,
and ZDNet.
Yeah. And what do you think about Wirecutter? That's another question
I've
that came
heard
in the
it. I've read
in
it
the queue
period.
for tech hardware recommendation.
That's, I believe, the New York Times, but
Yeah.
what I've read of it, which I read sometimes, has been good. I'm just I have relied on those other sites for decades and just go back to them first because they've never led me wrong. But that's, but it's also personal
And
experience.
that's what I have tended to do as well. Another question: will the State Bar of Ministers, for one of the reasons, if there isn't another staff person to scan the documents, or the office does not have $200 to $300 per month for cloud storage? Thank you for that suggestion. I will certainly take that under advisement. And yes, we do have, last time I looked, about 15,000. I'm sure it's grown a little bit since the last time I've looked, solo and small firms in the state of Michigan. So I think that that is an excellent suggestion, and thank you for putting that out there. Another question: is there an efficient way to back up or download emails in bulk? At the moment, I am able only to keep them on the mail program server. And I'll jump in on this, and then I'll ask Dan to jump in as well. One of the, in Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, they have had for years a way that you can download or create a PDF portfolio of emails. It has a plugin, particularly through Outlook, and Dan, if you can chime in on this in a moment. And it's a wonderful plugin, and it allows you to create a portfolio of your emails and save them. And one of the components of this functionality is that the attachments can also remain as attachments to those emails, which is always so cumbersome, and people don't know how to handle that when they're working in a paperless practice. So that would be one answer to that. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Well, no, Acrobat is a great way to do it if you don't have case or matter management software. Our office does, so we actually use the case management software, which captures every email sent automatically. And you just, with one click, it captures one or more emails received. If you have Acrobat, it'll do it great. And our book has step-by-step instructions and illustrations also.
Okay, another question is, can we get a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation? Yes, indeed. When we conclude the presentation today, I will go in and I will add that as a link in a follow-up email for you tomorrow. Okay, and I think we have one last question in the queue. Dan, is there a case management software company you recommend that has a 24/7 live support that is compatible with QuickBooks and ADP? Full server for me or cloud. I don't know anyone locally that I can trust with sensitive files. Where can I go?
That answer. I don't know that I'm sure there may be someone, but I don't know that does all of that. You need to search for what your needs are and find them. There are so many products out there now that there's one for literally everyone.
Yeah, and I can, as far as the case management software company, again, there are so many of those that are available that are compatible, or they do synchronize with QuickBooks and ADP. I want to say most of the cloud-based practice management applications do either a local server Since I'm assuming you are from Michigan, if you would like to call me directly, I can help with some recommendations for that and give you further guidance. And my direct dial phone number for anyone listening for practice management guidance is 517-346-6381. So Dan, I think that concludes our presentation for today.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually heading off to a bar association meeting, live of all things.
Okay. With that, I would like to thank you, Dan, and
You're
thanks to
welcome.
all of you for attending today. As always, your feedback is important, so we would appreciate it if you'd complete a short survey that will populate your screen when I do close programming today. And with that, thanks again for joining the State Bar of Michigan virtual seminar.